The Grammys are coming soon, and every year the most anticipated award of the night is Album of the Year. It's also the most controversial award every year because everybody has their opinions about what's the best and what should win. That's why for today's video, I'm going to look back at the past 15 winners of Album of the Year and put them in a tier list. I created a tier list with 5 different categories. The top category being no skips, these are the albums that won and are easily some of the greatest to ever do it. The Grammys got it right. Like the title says, these are the albums that won and that I agree with winning. Because this ranking is based solely on my opinion and nothing else. You've been warned. Not my winner. These albums are good, but maybe there's 1 or 2 that I would have preferred winning. But that doesn't mean these albums are bad at all, so remember that when I put some of your favorites in here. You Exist, these are the albums that are, well, you are a collection of songs that were written, recorded, and put on an album, and you won. And that's all I can say about you because, well, they're not really albums that I particularly like. And the final category, Beyonce should have won. Do I really need to explain that one? I love Beyonce, and it's actually criminal that she hasn't won out of the 4 times she's been nominated. And we'll get to all 4 of those, so just wait. Now that we've discussed all the categories, let's get into the ranking. Starting in 2010, Album of the Year went to Taylor Swift for Fearless. And this is an album that will always have a special place in my heart. I always say that Fearless is the album that made Taylor Swift, Taylor Swift. Because it really did launch her career with hits like Love Story and You Belong With Me, which are both still staples in her set lists. However, if you look at the 4 albums that she was nominated against, obviously one of them stands out to me, and that's I Am Sasha Fierce by Beyonce. I mean, Single Ladies, Halo, If I Were a Boy, Diva, Radio. This is an album that if you're not a fan of Beyonce and keep up with her now, this is probably how you still see her. Like you see her as this girl. And as much as I love Fearless, you guys know where I have to put this album. Because that's right, Beyonce should have won. And I'm sure that's a choice that some people aren't going to agree with. But whatever, let's keep going because the next year Arcade Fire won for their album The Suburbs. And I'm not gonna lie, I've never heard this album before I did research for this video. And when I listened to it, I was just thinking, is it over yet? It's just not for me. I thought it was kind of boring. The first song went on for a while. Actually, I don't know how long the first song was. It could have been 3 minutes, could have been 5. All I know is I remember thinking, is it over now? And it was up against so many albums that are still talked about now. The Fame Monster, Need You Now, Recovery, Teenage Dream. Regardless of how we feel about Katy Perry now, Teenage Dream really should have won because that's one of the greatest pop albums of the century. Argue with your mother. So for those reasons, The Suburbs, You Exist. But you know, enough negativity for now. Let's go on to 2012 with 21 by Adele. This album, I mean, we all know that it's one of the greatest, right? So let's just put it on top of no skips already. Because of this album, Adele is tied for the record for most Grammys won by a woman for a single night. She's tied with Beyonce in 2010, which further proves to me that Sasha Fierce should have won that year, but that's beside the point. 21 was the very obvious winner for this year, and she was up against some pretty strong albums. Loud by Rihanna, Doo Wop and the Hooligans by Bruno Mars, Born to Sway by Lady Gaga. All great albums, but none of them compare to 21. I'm calling it now, this will probably be in the top 2 for all the albums we're going to talk about in this video, but I already know what number 1's going to be. But you'll have to wait and see what it is. Moving along, 2013's Album of the Year winner was Babel by Mumford & Sons. And this was another album that I didn't listen to before doing research for this video, but unlike the Arcade Fire album, I loved this one. I fully thought this was going to be another one of those albums that I listen to and think, really? But after listening to it, I fully think it deserved to win. And I'm saying that knowing that one of the other nominees was Channel Orange by Frank Ocean. And it shall go in the Grammys got it right. Because you know what? They ate with that one. Now Swifties, bear with me on this one. Because I agree that Radical Access Memories by Daft Punk deserved to win in 2014. I just realized while recording this that I kept saying Radical Access Memories, but the album's actually called Random Access Memories. I guess I was thinking of Dua Lipa, so forgive me. Anyways, back to the video. I know. We love Red. Taylor loves Red. It's definitely her favorite album. She even said that for a second she thought Red won that award, but no, it went to Daft Punk. And yeah, I gotta agree. If I'm being honest, the original recordings for Red I'm not crazy for. At least most of the album I just didn't listen to. That was until Taylor's version, which I do think is better than Radical Access Memories. But that wasn't the version that we had in 2014 when these awards took place, so I'm gonna put this in the Grammys got it right. But just so we're clear, Radical Access Memories is better than Red, but Red Taylor's version is better than Radical Access Memories. We got it? Okay, good. All right. Next is probably the most what the hell album of the year win of all time. In 2015, Beyonce's self-titled album, which she surprise dropped, was nominated. That album literally changed the music industry, popularized surprised album drops. It also was released on a Friday back when music used to come out on Tuesdays, and then everyone started to release music on Fridays because of Beyonce. And with that all said, Morning Fades by Beck won that year. Yeah, bet you've never heard this album before. In fact, name one song on it. I'll wait. Go ahead. Thought so. I actually did give this album a listen, and I remember liking how it sounded, but I can't name any of the songs. It's just, how did this win? And how did Beyonce not win? So I think we all know where I'm going to put this. Beyonce should have won. And this is probably the year that Beyonce should have won. Another controversial year that people still debate over to this day is 2016 when Taylor Swift won for 1989. This album is widely considered to be a pop bible and delivered so many of Taylor Swift's most recognizable songs. Shake It Off, Blank Space, Wildest Dreams, Out of the Woods, Bad Blood, Style. It also has a lot of fan favorite songs from Swifties like New Romantics and Clean. It catapulted Taylor Swift to superstardom. And I'd argue that this is her most popular album. However, that year it was nominated against Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly, which is widely considered to be his best album. So that year we had two of the biggest artists of the century delivering their biggest albums, and I love them both a lot. To Pimp a Butterfly is quite possibly my favorite rap album in the world. I've even seen some Swifties say that he should have won over Taylor that year, and I really don't know who I think should have won. Those albums are pretty even for me. Like, I listen to 1989 when I drive and To Pimp a Butterfly when I work out. So because I can't decide which one of those two I'd prefer, I'm just gonna put 1989 in no skips because it is in fact a no skips album, and really it's definitely a worthy winner, but I'm not going to put it above 21. Speaking of Adele, she won the following year for 25, which was another controversial win because of, you guessed it, Beyonce. Beyonce's Lemonade album is widely considered to be her best one. It's not my personal favorite, which we're going to talk about later. And even Adele, who's a huge fan of Beyonce, said in her acceptance speech that Lemonade should have won. She was crying about it, and yeah, I'd have to agree with Adele on this. If this was almost any other year, I'd put 25 in no skips. But only because it was nominated against Lemonade of all albums, I have to put it in Beyonce should have won. Side note, I'm not sure how to organize this category because 25 is the best album on this list, but Morning Phase by Beck is the album that I look at and think, yeah, Beyonce should have won. Actually, yeah, I'm just gonna organize that one based on how much I think Beyonce should have won. But that's enough talk about Beyonce for now. In 2014, Bruno Mars won Album of the Year for 24 Karat Magic, and this was an album that I vividly remember was everywhere. That came out my senior year of high school, and the songs on this album, like the title track and That's What I Like, were unavoidable. And this is objectively a good album, even though I'm not the biggest Bruno Mars fan. But if you look at all the other nominees that year, I'd argue that every single one of them is better. Especially Damn and Melodrama. Those are the two that I really thought were going to be like the ones to beat. And I remember being shocked by 24 Karat Magic winning. But again, that's just my own bias. So Bruno, congrats, you are the first entry in the Not My Winner category. But I'm sure Bruno will win Album of the Year at least one more time in his career, because he is someone that the Grammys tend to love. Moving on to our last Grammys from 2010's Golden Hour's Kacey Musgrave's magnum opus. I don't think she's ever going to top this album. And looking at the albums it was nominated against, I think Golden Hour is by far the clear winner. But shout out to the Black Panther soundtrack and Beer Bongs and Bentleys, those are probably my two favorites besides Golden Hour. This is one of my favorite country albums of all time. I remember being so happy when Kacey won. Like, if you haven't heard Golden Hour, I definitely recommend giving it a listen, because guess what? It is a no skips album. We got 5 more albums to talk about, starting with When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go by Billie Eilish. And this is another one of those cases where if this was any other year, I would probably agree with this. But it was up against Thank You Next by Ariana Grande, which Billie herself said in her acceptance speech that she should have won. And then we got that one gif of Ariana's going like, I'll put it on screen right now because I probably butchered it. Because of this album, Billie became the 3rd person ever to win all 4 big Grammy Awards. The other 2 being Adele and some guy from the 80s. Hold on. Christopher Cross. Christopher Cross is the other person to do it. Yeah, I don't know who that is, but him, Billie, and Adele are the only 3 people to win Album of the Year, Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best New Artist. And yeah, that's a big accomplishment, but I can't deny that Thank You Next is just that girl. At the time, this was my favorite Ariana Grande album. It isn't anymore, but it's still really good. And I love Billie. The Hit Me Hard and Soft tour was one of the best concerts I've ever been to. But you know, we're not here to talk about that tour. We're here to talk about When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? And it pains me to put it in the not my winner category. Billie, I love you. We're gonna put you above Bruno, actually. Go above Bruno, but not my winner. I love you. All right, let's take a moment because this next album is one of the greatest albums that's ever been written. Spoiler alert, it's gonna go on the very top of no skips. It is the greatest album that this artist has ever done and will probably ever do. Hearing these songs live is still one of the greatest moments of my whole life. And it's an album that I will never get sick of. That's right, it's Folklore by Taylor Swift. We're just gonna put you all the way up here. Even though she was up against artists like Dua Lipa and Post Malone, Taylor Swift was the obvious winner that year. I vividly remember when she surprised the Swifties by announcing Folklore, because she announced it and then it came out that very night. The songwriting in this album is just Taylor at her best. Cardigan, Exile, My Tears Ricochet, which is my favorite Taylor Swift song of all time. August, Illicit Affairs. This was the best set on the Eras tour. Argue with your mother on that one because I will fight you if you argue with me. Its sister album, Evermore, is also a very good one, but most albums to me pale in comparison to Folklore, and that's why it's on the very top of no skips. Taylor, you outdid yourself on this one. Ugh, my battery died, so I had to change it, but we're back. 2021 was probably the most recent win that made people go, huh? We Are by Jon Batiste won that year, and because it's mainly a jazz album, most people probably haven't listened to it. We Are was also nominated against albums like Sour, Happier Than Ever, Planet Her, Justice, Love for Sale, Evermore, Donda. You get the point. I remember listening to this album when it won because, yeah, I was one of those people that's never heard of it before. And I remember liking it, especially its song Freedom. I'm pretty sure that was like the big one from it. But especially because of how much Sour dominated that whole year, I fully expected it to win. And I'm sure that Olivia will win Album of the Year at some point in her career. But We Are still is a good album, so I'm gonna put it in not my winner. Now, I'm sure you guys can guess where I'm gonna put this next album. Harry's House by Harry Styles won against one of my favorite albums in the entire world, Renaissance by Beyonce. And I don't get it. And that's no shade to Harry at all. I adore him. But Renaissance is my favorite Beyonce album. It's one of my favorites in the world. I've said before that I think Harry's House is great, but Renaissance is perfect. This was also the night where Beyonce became the most awarded person in Grammy history. And winning Album of the Year that night really would have been the cherry on top of it all. And I really do love Harry's House. It might be my favorite Harry Styles album, but only because it was up against Renaissance of all albums. I have to put it in, you guessed it, Beyonce should have won. The final album we're going to talk about is Midnights by Taylor Swift. This was the 4th time Taylor won this award, which is more times than anyone else. And in case it wasn't clear, I'm a Swiftie. I love Taylor. I love Midnights. Would've, could've, should've is one of my favorite songs from her, but I really thought SOS by SZA was gonna take it. And over a year later, I still think SOS should have won. And I feel like that's the general consensus from most people, especially because SZA doesn't give us albums that often. We finally got Lana a year after it was announced, but because it's considered to be a deluxe for SOS, it's not gonna be nominated for Album of the Year next year. And I really want SZA to win this award someday. And she should have won it last year. I'm sorry, Taylor, but that's also because Midnights isn't one of my favorite albums from her. It's great, but definitely not breaking my top 5. So we're gonna put Midnights right here on top of not my winner. That's it for this ranking. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe and let me know what you agree with and what you disagree with. I wonder who's gonna win Album of the Year at this year's Grammys. Obviously, in case you couldn't guess it from this list, I'm rooting for Cowboy Carter, but I could also see albums like Short and Sweet and Hit Me Hard and Soft winning. But let's be honest with ourselves, the real winner should be Eternal Sunshine by Ariana Grande, which for some reason wasn't nominated. Grammys, I will never forgive you for that, because how did Ariana not get nominated? But I'm gonna spare you guys from that rant because I can go on for hours about Eternal Sunshine, and I'll just see you in the next video.